Today on JiK Labs, we're going to look at the functions SUMIF and SUMIFS, which allows you to add given certain criteria. Let's get started. Now that you have Excel opened up, we're back to our summary page where we have seen on our last videos where we used the sum functions to total all of the sales. But today we want to look at it a little bit more in depth, and we want to get the sales of each individual salesperson. So you can see up here at this top half, this is summing everything. This is the summing of the range, this is the summing of column E, and this is the sum of sales where we went through and we've named our cell references. We're going to put that video link for naming cell references up in the corner of the video here for you. We're going to utilize the cell names that we've made in the previous videos to use these functions. We'll also show you how you can utilize just the cell references, but to make life easier, we're going to use the cell names. So let's jump down here. And why did we say SUMIF and SUMIFS? Well, pretty much they do the same exact thing. SUMIF will take an equation that we set forth. It will add up everything given a certain criteria. It only has one criteria that has to be met, where SUMIFS allows you to have multiple sets of criteria, which we're going to look at a little bit later. But right now, let's look at SUMIF. So we're going to come in here. We want to know the sum of the sales of Alice. SUMIF, open the parentheses, the range. Well, the range we want to look up is salesperson. The criteria, we want it to equal Alice. And then we're not putting any absolute cell references in here because as we go down, we want it to be B12, 13, 14, 15, and so on. And then we're going to reference the sum range, which is sales. And we're going to hit close the parentheses and hit OK. Now if we're going to come in here, copy everything down. Now we have the sales. Well, we don't know yet. Let's do a sum of all of these totals. 128,862. And that equals up here from our summation of all of our sales. Once again, if we look at this equation, we have SUMIF, open the parentheses. We're looking at, what are we looking at? We're looking at the salesperson. What does that salesperson need to reference? In this case, it's Alice. And what are we adding up? If the salesperson equals Alice, we're going to add up the sales. If we come down here and look for Robert, we can see the same thing. We're going to look at the range of salesperson, and if it equals Robert, we're going to add up the sales. That was SUMIF with using the cell reference names that we utilize. Let's go really quick through just to input the ranges as you go. But we would highly recommend using cell name references. It just makes your life easier. So SUMIF, open the parentheses, data. We're going to highlight all the salespeople, the data in that salesperson column. Then we're going to say we want it to equal Alice. And you can see here, since we clicked on the different tabs as we're doing this equation, it said data tab. And here is the summary tab. If your equation starts on the summary tab, you don't generally have to reference the summary. And I'll show you that here in a moment. So we got the data range. We want it to equal Alice. And then we want to come in here back to the data and get the sales amount. And close those parentheses and hit enter. As we can see, those numbers are exactly the same. But again, let's come in here. We see how it was referencing the summary tab, but we've started on the summary tab. So we're going to delete that out and go ahead and hit enter again. And you're going to see that number has not changed. We have to reference the data tab because we are not on the data tab. We have to tell Excel where to look. It's okay to delete the summary tab reference because we are already on the summary tab and B12 is where we want Excel to look. If we were to come in here and delete the data, Now Excel would be looking in this sheet, the summary sheet, rather than the data sheet. And then it was going to try to add up, or reference in this case, C3 to C82. And that's not going to work because likely so, there's no data in E3 to E82 over here to give the sum of the sales. So we're going to put the Alice equation back to using the name references. And we're going to come in here and actually we're going to lock the column in the reference, because what we're going to do right now is we're going to copy this and paste this over to here so everyone can see it, and put in the reference, or put in the apostrophe so everyone can see the equation for their references. So this is how the format of SUMIF utilizes. You have the range criteria, the criteria you want to match, and then what you're going to add up. Now looking at SUMIFS, it is a little bit different than SUMIF. It does the same exact thing with more criteria abilities, but the layout is a little bit different. So we're going to come in here and type SUMIF. Now the range, SUMIFS, the sum range, as we stated, is going to be sales. The criteria range is going to be the salesperson. And that criteria, so that's the criteria range, and now it wants that criteria. Well, we want that to equal B12. But we're going to come in here and add in the absolute cell reference. So when we copy it over for referencing, the B column doesn't change, and we're going to close those parentheses. We're going to format it to the dollars, and we can see that now SUMIF and SUMIFS equal. If we're going to copy this down, copy this equation summation over, and you'll see we have the same exact totals here and here, as well as up top when we were just adding up all of the references or all of the sales. So why do we have SUMIF and SUMIFS if both of these equations have resulted in the same exact information for us? Well, as we mentioned earlier, SUMIF allows for one checking of criteria, and that's it. SUMIFS allows for multiple criterias. Well, right now we're only checking one criteria, and that's if the salesperson equals Alice, Jack, Robert, or Sophia. So both of these equations would work. But if we're going to add in more criteria that we want to check when we're summing up these values, we're going to have to use SUMIFS. So my recommendation, and what I always use, I generally use SUMIFS. If I'm only checking one criteria or I'm checking 3 or 4 different criteria, the reason being is, like we said earlier, the equations are set up a little bit different. So this is SUMIF and this is SUMIFS. So once again, SUMIF is the criteria you want to check, the reference criteria that you want it to match, and what are you summing. SUMIFS is what are you summing, the criteria range, and what you want that to equal. So that is the only variation between these two equations that net you the same exact answer when only using one criteria with our set of data. So now we want to look at the summation of sales by the salesperson given this above here date range. We've already have these equations laid out, but we're going to go through the process. So we're going to do SUMIFS because we have more than one criteria to look at. So the sum range is our sales. The first criteria range we want to look at is the salesperson. And then the very next comma is what does that criteria need to equal? We want that to equal B12. We're going to lock in that the column reference. We could close that parentheses and be done. And it's going to give us 39,483. But if when you hit comma, it's going to say, what is your next criteria range? We're going to say date. The name reference for date is the date of the invoice back on our data page. We will show you that here briefly. So we're going to hit comma again. And what does that second set of criteria need to equal? Well, if we were to click E8, which is the start date, it's going to say any sales that are Alice and equal the 1st of January 2021, it's going to add those up. Let's just go ahead and do that real quick. Well, she has no sales. Let's come over to the data sheet, Alice, and let's go ahead and make this 1/1/2021. And we can see it was 1939. And we're going to come back to summary, and we're going to see we got 1939. But that is not actually the equation that we want. So what we want to do is we want to add up the sales of each salesperson given this date range. We already have some samples down here, but we're going to look at it a little bit more detailed. So once again, we're going to have to use SUMIFS because we are using more than one criteria. SUMIFS. Again, this starts out with the sum range. We want to add up the sales. The criteria, the first criteria is the salesperson. We're going to look at all the salespeople, and then we want them to equal the salespeople we have listed over here. I'm going to go ahead and lock the column into place so when we copy it over, there won't be any updates. And then that's for the first criteria. The second criteria is we're going to look at is the date. That is our second set of criteria range, but now we're looking at the criteria. We want this, we have to put in an apostrophe, to be greater than or equal to the start date. But when you're doing this in SUMIFS, you have to put the range to make both of these work. You have to put in your quotation marks greater than or equal to, close the quotation marks, the and sign, and then your cell reference. That's going to allow it to say, I want to look at greater than or equal to E8. We're going to put in another cell range, another parentheses that's going to say what is criteria 3. We're going to come in here and say date again, but Josh, we just did date. That's correct, because we want to sum the date that is greater than and equal to as well as less than equal to our end range. So we have to have both variables put in there. So we're going to put in date, and once again we're going to say less than or equal to and the end date. We're going to close those parentheses, copy everything down, and you're going to see, well, wait, oops. See what I did there? We didn't lock in the absolute cell references on our start and end dates. So let's come in here and add in our absolute cell references and now add them up. Well, you can see this is the full year. Let's just say we want to go to 1/28. Well, these update all these sales. So let's go 22,141. Let's look at this. All right, so here is where January ends. And let's just add that up. And that is 22,141. That's what we get over here on our summary sheet. If we wanted to go through, say, 6 months, there you go. Well, those are the totals because our data ends June 27th. Any cell range, and you can, let's say we just want to look at, from 2/1. Those numbers will continue to update as you go because when we're looking at these equations, we're taking SUMIFS. What are we summing is all of the sales. What are we looking at first? We're looking at the salesperson equals Alice. The date is greater than or equal to our start date, and we've now locked those in place, which I didn't do the first time through. And our third criteria is date again, but it's less than or equal to our end date, which is also locked in place when we copy and paste those guys down. As you can see, SUMIFS allows you to add more restraints or more specific criteria to what your equations will go and sum for you. SUMIF allows you to say, add this up if this is this. Well, SUMIFS allows you to add this up if this is this, this is this, this is this, and you can keep going. There's no set limit to how many variables you can look at. So just for reference, we're going to copy this guy over here. We're going to add in the apostrophe so you can look at the full equation. So just to highlight, these are the equations that we were looking at today. SUMIF and SUMIFS. Again, I would mention and recommend just using SUMIFS. If you want to start with one criteria, you're set. If you want to add more criteria, you just come in, edit your equation, and just start adding in more information for yourself. SUMIF and SUMIFS with one criteria will get you the same equation. If you need to add more information, SUMIFS is the way you're going to have to go. And at that point, it's already formatted for SUMIFS. If you use SUMIF, you have to change the layout of the equation because they do not match. You have to do them in different orders. So hopefully that clarifies and makes your life a little bit easier as you're trying to pick and choose things that you add up at a given set of data based on the criteria that you set forth. So today we've went through, and as we made these equations, we just typed them all in. Don't forget, you can always come up here and hit the insert function key, and it'll take you to the wizard, allow you to look and see, and help you remind you of what steps need to go where. Thanks for watching JiK Labs today, where we explored SUMIF and SUMIFS. Hopefully these skills are going to help you grow and build your Excel knowledge, making your life a little bit easier as you need to sum things up given certain criteria. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you all next week. Today on JiK Labs, we're going to look at the sum functions. I'm going to put that video link up here so everyone can take a look at that, because as opposed to you is... So if we were to tell it,